Hello, BookTube. Our Friday reads for you. I had a very good reading week here at Hyde Cottage, both in terms of quantity and quality. And I'm a little dazed at the moment because the Kirkus book that I just finished for Kirkus Reviews was actually good. And that's disorienting. When it comes to the books that I usually get, that's disorienting. So I'm going to add that to the list of quantity and quality. I wanted to show you some of the things I'm going to be reading this weekend. I'm going to start with the one that I'll probably start with just because it interests me the most. It's a work of history. It's called Burned Alive by Alberto Martinez. And it's about Giordano Bruno, who the Catholic Church burned alive in public in 1600 for heresy, for all the strange doctrines that he was putting out. He wasn't doing it out of any kind of spite. He was merely positing that the earth is one of many worlds, that there are many worlds out there, and that the earth has a soul, that the earth has a spirit of its own. And it's a gruesome, incredibly horrifying death. And I think, from what I gather is correct, this book came to me with no pub sheet. It's from Reaction Press, though. The Reaction books are really good. And from what I gather, the author wants to stress that the burning of Giordano Bruno was a precursor to the Church's persecution of Galileo in 1616. So we shall see, one way or another. It wouldn't make any difference to me. It looks like a history with real meat on its bones, so I'm eager to get to it. And another one, this next one, is very current. It's not historical. It's very current. It's by Siva Vaidyanathan, and it's called Anti-Social Media. Mainly about the evils of Facebook. Unmonitored, uncontrolled, unwisely used Facebook. But I haven't dipped into it, so I don't know. The key thing with books like this, and since 2016 there are more and more and more of them, the key thing with any book like this is how controlled the author will be. Not how uncontrolled the American Midwest is in its use and belief of Facebook, but how controlled the author will be in looking at the subject. Yeah, I'm not at all interested in reading yet another Facebook or social media book in which the author stares calmly into the camera for a moment, and then the minute you've started reading, bolts up from their seat, waves their arms in the air, and runs screaming for the nearest exit. I'm not interested in reading that, so I'm hoping that's not what this is. We shall see. I will report back. Then another one, the next one is something we've seen on this channel before. I'm amazed that I've let it go this long. It's Spying on Whales by Nick Pyenson. This is about whales in the ocean, whale preservation, whale natural history, whale society, whale cognition. And it starts, the ideological framework starts right in the title with the word spying instead of observing, because the author's right. We hardly see anything of these creatures' lives. When they come to the surface, we see them. But usually, the other 99% we don't see. We can only extrapolate, and there's a huge amount we don't know. So despite the fact that we've been killing these things to the brink of extinction and beyond for 200 years, we know very little about them compared to, for instance, a springbok on the African plain. So I'm counting on learning a lot, but I would read it anyway, because it's a new natural history about whales. And the next one is a thriller. It's a big fat thriller. Fifth to Die. This is by J.D. Barker, who wrote The Fourth Monkey, that I really liked. Thought it was a really good, bouncy thriller. And J.D. Barker's name might be familiar to you. We've heard it just recently on this channel when we saw that Dracula pastiche novel, Dracul, that was written in part by a great-great-grandnephew of Bram Stoker, but also in part, and I suspect in large part, by J.D. Barker. So he's had a busy time. But this is about a serial killer. And the extra twist, from what I gather from just reading the Dust Jacket, is that it's also about a serial killer's mother, who's not much better than he is, if not worse. So I'm always up for a thriller like that. I read these things for just the peanut enjoyment of it, the popcorn enjoyment of it. I don't ever expect any more with a serial killer thriller or a police thriller or anything like that. I don't ever expect any more to encounter something better than that. I don't hold them to that line. Every once in a while, I will encounter one of these books where the author has actually raised it up above its the hackneyed premises. But I don't expect that, because that's not fair. So this could easily amuse me. And the next one is translation. As far as I know, it's a new translation, and it's by it's Singapore Dream, and it's travel writings of Herman Hesse, who wrote Steppenwolf and The Glass Bead Game and a whole bunch of other novels that I think are weirdly underknown in the 21st century. There was a publisher in the mid-20th century who came out with the whole run of this author here in America. They were in little white mass-market paperbacks, and they were very pretty. It was a sturdy enough translation, certainly enough so that if you read, Magister Ludi or Damien or Siddhartha or Steppenwolf or something like that, you would certainly have known that you were in the presence of a very good author, maybe even a major author. And then those little here in America, those little mass markets disappeared, and nothing similar has taken their place. There's a trade paperback of Steppenwolf that you will sometimes find in new bookstores, but and Siddhartha, his book Siddhartha is sometimes still taught in schools, but nothing like the breadth of what he did. I don't think either of those books is anywhere near his best book. And I didn't know that he wrote travel writing. And I think just in general, I think it's time for a Herman Hesse revival. So a whole bunch of new translations, maybe a little bit higher profile would be nice. But I am interested to see. So this is in 1911. Herman Hesse sailed the southeastern Asian waters on a trip that would define much of his later writing. He brings his unique eye to scenes such as the adventures in a rickshaw, watching foreign theater performances, exploring strange floating cities on stilts, and luxuriating in the simple beauty of the lush, natural landscape. I've tried that. It's marginally possible to do if you have mounds and mounds of mosquito netting. Even in the doldrums of travel, he records his experience with faithful humor, quiet insight, and sharp observation, offering a broad vision of travel in the early 1900s. That sounds good. So I'll just blaze right through this thing. Then the next one is a paperback reprint of a book that I read when it first came out last year, and it didn't do anything for me, but a lot of people whose opinions I respect kind of liked it, and that makes me think that I should revisit it. So when it came to me, that's all the prompting I need. It's by Douglas Brunt, and it's called Trophy Son. And it's about a young man who's, he's raised in upper middle class Connecticut. In this case, it's upper middle class Philadelphia, and he's raised to be a tennis star. His father is dead set on making him into a tennis prodigy. Practices him all the time, works him all the time. He does nothing else. He becomes, a star at an early age. And the novel, I guessed fairly early on in the novel what the topical twist was going to be, what the main character was going to do once he became a tennis star. And I was right about the twist. But the novel follows him throughout the vicissitudes of his professional life and his disillusionment with the sport and whatnot, and his experiences being a star. And it gave me trouble the first time I read it. I only read it once. I didn't read the advanced copy. I just read the finished copy, and it gave me trouble. Mainly because in Iowa, I knew real-life versions of this character very well. Young men who had been trained from age of 3 to play tennis, to concentrate on tennis, to practice at tennis for several hours every day, to study films of their practice for more time, to study films of their opponents once they started to rack up opponents, to go for trophies and more trophies, to work on the minuscule tiny dust speck of their form that isn't machine perfect, and to do very little else. By the time I met the 3 or 4 young men that fit this description when they were 18, it's not an exaggeration to say there was nothing left. There was nothing else but a trained animal. And even a trained animal isn't doing the phenomenon complete justice, because even a well-trained working dog, a shepherd on a farm, or a well-trained horse, in their downtime, their 3 dimensions will revive. If you sit with a horse in their stall, if you sit by the fire with a work dog after a long day of herding sheep, the person reemerges, the joking, the kidding, the balance, the 3 dimensions. And that doesn't happen with the children. Human children can be damaged beyond recall by their parents by doing this sort of thing. And it would have happened with this character. So when I read this book for the first time, and I get to him at age 20, feeling all sorts of existential rebellion and questioning the deeper meanings of things. I was just rebelling on every page. I was thinking, no, I've met, little trained ponies like him, and they don't do it. They aren't capable of it anymore, and they never are after that point. No matter what happens to them, they never are anymore after that point. They're just the human equivalent of what I have always called ball dogs. I'm sure you've met one or two where the owner has allowed the dog to become so monomaniacally obsessed with thrown ball that they're empty. There's nothing else there. There's no other. They eat only to chase balls. They drink water only to chase balls, only to have the strength to do that. They don't care about interaction of any kind. They don't care about anything like that. They're just ball dogs. And that's what tennis pros are. Young male tennis pros tend to be that. Certainly a kid who had this kind of upbringing would have been. But when I got the paperback and I thought about all this again, I thought, well, it says right there on the cover that it's a novel. So maybe you ought to get down off your soapbox and give it a chance. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reread it and see how it goes as a made-up story. And then speaking of the made-up stories, we have this here. This is new. This is What's Left of the Night by R.C. Soteropoulos. This is a gay novel about the poet Cavafy when he was a young man, conflicted about his own homosexuality. It's a rich vein of material for historical fiction. I don't think I've ever read a historical novel about Cavafy, but I've read all his poetry. I think it can be an incredibly lovely poet. And I confess, know anything about his life. I don't think I've ever read a biography of Constantine Cavafy. So this is going to be, it's going to, when I read the premise of this thing and realized that it was, a biographical novel tightly mapped on the author's life, my first thought was Arctic Summer, a novel that came out a couple of years ago from Europa Press that was about the life of E.M. Forster, the great novelist. And that novel disappointed me because it seemed too closely mapped to the life of Forster. So that if you had read Furbank's biography, Furbank's big fat biography of E.M. Forster, which is fantastic reading, it's one of those biographies that's every bit as good a reading as any novel would be. If you've read that book, as I pointed out in my review, the novel is going to seem like a sort of a pale imitation. And you don't want that in a novel. And you'll only get that if the novelist is paying too much attention to factual veracity and not doing, I know I just said this, but not doing what a novel can do. You have to let a novel do what a novel can do. A novel is not just a biography with quotation marks. So it's possible that I will be helped in enjoying this book by the fact that I don't know that much about Cavafy's life. So I won't know. I don't know if any of the incidents in here are mapped onto his, drawn from his personal existence or not. We shall see. I'll be much better able to experience it just as a novel, and that's good. And then the next one is a Penguin classic that comes out in September. I got an advance copy, and it's a subject that's right up my alley. It's the Penguin Book of Outer Space Exploration, which extends certainly the outer space speculation in the past, but it covers and excerpts from all kinds of writing from the minute that the Soviets shot a dog into space, and Yuri Gagarin and the Apollo missions and all of that. And it's another Penguin original anthology. We've seen a few of those in the last few months. I always applaud them. I always think they're smartly done. And I lived this subject. We're done with the golden age of manned space exploration, I believe. And I think that's probably a good thing. I think it's a silly anachronism to put humans into a module and send them to Mars. It's great for headlines. It's great for TV. But it's not great for exploration. Especially not that automation is so much better. There was just an astounding discovery made on Mars by a machine that didn't put anyone's life in danger to get there. It's not putting anyone's life in danger to be there. It's not going to put anyone's life in danger to stay there. It's infinite in every way, and it just discovered organic matter on Mars. And I don't think we're far off from discovering active, living organic matter on Mars. I don't think if a random ditch into the topsoil, just in the middle of nowhere, by one probe can discover this stuff, it's hard to believe that there aren't living biomes under the surface of Mars. fed by subterranean water, but one way or another, I followed the U.S. space mission all along, and thought it was incredible. Despite what I just said, I even when I was following it, I was thinking, this is exorbitant. People are dying. There's no reason for this. Just send machines instead. That's just as amazing. But I admit, there was an atavistic part of me that was thrilled by people going to other worlds. And this is going to be full of that. So, so I can't wait. I can't wait to read it. And then the last thing is an amazing gift of generosity from one of you. I got a package in the mail the other day, a thick box with 2 hardcovers in it of books that I had recently hauled in paperback on this channel. Roger Morris's book on candidate Richard Nixon, everything up until he was elected president, and Anne Somerset's book on Queen Elizabeth I. And in both cases, I had said that I only got the paperbacks because A, they were cheap, and B, they would be placeholders, because what I really want is the hardcovers of both of them. I know that I love the books. I know that I want to keep them. I just don't have hardcovers at the moment. And somebody sent me both those books in hardcover. I think that's just an amazing thing. It's a pure example of the kind of community that we've built here on BookTube. I love it. And so I'm going to reread Anne Somerset's biography of Elizabeth I now that I have it in hardcover, now that I don't have to worry about it falling apart. The only problem is I don't know who sent it to me. So if you're watching this video, please pipe up in the comments field. I live with a 15-pound paper shredder, and she misses nothing. So if there was some sort of note or other with the book in the packaging, it was shredded and digested before I could get to it. I never even thought to look. I was expecting that if somebody sent me books, they would send me an email. And I don't think that's ever happened. So unless the gift giver wants to be anonymous, I'd love to thank you. So I think that's wonderful. So I now have a copy of Elizabeth I by Anne Somerset, which I consider to be the best modern biography of Queen Elizabeth I that there is. That I'm just going to reread. So that's great. So there you go. That is my my Friday reads. And as usual, I'm fascinated to know what you're reading this Friday as we approach the middle of June. And I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.